going on, everybody? It's RoarYG here, and welcome back to another episode of Sleeper Sunday. So Sleeper Sunday, for those of you that don't know, is a series that I came up with showcasing fun hidden decks that you may not know about that can deal quite a bit of damage in the proper hands. We'll be going over a basic deck list, strengths, weaknesses, what can be done to make the deck better, and of course a few replays to see the deck in action. And in today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the winner of this month's revised poll, Super Quantums. Now before we get started, I do want to apologize greatly that this should have been out on the first Sunday of the month like all my other Sleeper Sundays are supposed to be. However, I got really sick at the beginning of this month. I don't know what it was. I think it was allergies, but I don't know. It was just completely destroying me. My ears were plugged and I could barely hear. My nose was all like both congested and runny. My throat was murdering me. All sorts of other different symptoms, and it was just really bad, and I could not even think about picking up the camera. It hurt a lot just to make the coverage of the newest Morphtronic support. That video turned out really crappy because I looked awful. But I am here to say that I'm alive, and I'm here to make some actual content and not just some stuff that I'm mooching off my friends for. I want to get the Sleeper Sunday out. I didn't want to skip this month, and it's going to be actually really hectic trying to make next month's, but it's going to be worth it overall because I really enjoy making the series. I really hope you guys enjoy watching it as well. I know it doesn't do too well compared to a lot of my other stuff, but I still have a lot of fun making it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and actually look into Super Quantums. So Super Quantums are actually the winner of the revised poll of this month rather than a regular poll, because the first winner, Vampire, I was just completely unable to do anything with, which is weird considering that I've actually played more Vampire than a lot of the other decks that I've listed, but I mean, I just couldn't find any way to make it work compared to like regular Zombie. And so Super Quantums are the winner for this time. So Super Quantums, for those of you that don't know, is a Protect the Castle style deck that debuted in Wing Raiders all the way back in 2016, I believe it was February, with its only other wave of support, and by wave I mean like loosely wave, there's only a couple of cards, was released in Dark Neostorm back in I believe 2019, that revolves around spamming Xyz monsters until they can combine them all for their extremely powerful main boss monster. Almost all of them revolve around having effects both on summon and if they're sent to the graveyard, sort of as a combination of Satellar Knights and the Burning Abyss archetypes, with the Xyz monsters for the most part having some form of removal that can be a quick effect while also being able to attach materials from hand or field. And if you couldn't tell, they're actually based on Power Ranger and Sentai tropes, with the gimmick of the different colored Rangers being like blue, green, red, and white, with their respective Zord mechs, which all have the same color, with the end goal of making a giant Megazord to fend off the enemy, with a cute little quirky talking mascot to go along with it. Super Quantum is a very interesting archetype, as it was always hailed as something that was pretty bad, especially when Lynx actually came out and completely obliterated the deck's playstyle. But with the Master Rule 4 2020 revision, or Master Rule 5, whatever you want to call it, the deck actually got a huge boost, especially with its new support that allows it to be a lot more consistent and have a lot more versatility in what it can actually do. And then of course a few other outside support pieces here and there actually ended up making the deck a lot stronger than a lot of people may think. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start off with their quirky little mascot. This is Super Quantal Fairy Alphin, one of the key cards of the deck. As you can see, we are playing 3 of everything, but this is one of the most important ones that you want to see, which is why a good maybe 12 cards in the deck focus around actually getting it out. And it says once per turn, you can target a Super Quant monster you control. All face-up monsters you currently control become that monster's level, which isn't the really good effect of it, but it actually does help a lot with the things like the Dangers and Trias Hierarchia in the deck, which we do play. But it says that you contribute it to reveal 3 Super Quants with different names from your deck. Your opponent randomly picks one for you to special to your field, and then you send the rest to the graveyard, which is a hard once per turn. And if you know anything about this archetype from what I just explained, all of them have effects both on summon and when they're sent to the graveyard, so you're triggering 3 different effects at once. This can be really good no matter really what the opponent picks, unless you have a really bad hand situation, because Blue Layer on summon adds a Super Quant card from your deck to your hand except itself, which is really good for getting your field spell, which I'll get to here in a minute. Green Layer allows you to special a Super Quant from your hand. Red Layer allows you to target a Super Quant card in the grave and add it to hand. And White Layer allows you to send a Super Quant from deck to the grave and then copy its attribute and level. For the graveyard effects, Blue Layer is a pseudo Daigusto Emerald just without the draw. Green Layer allows you to discard a Super Quant card and draw a card. Red Layer allows you to target a Super Quant monster in your grave except itself and special it, but it can't activate its effects. And White Layer allows you to add an Alphin from your deck or graveyard to your hand. All of these are some really strong effects, even though something like Blue Layer is actually a little bit underwhelming and something like Green is a bit situational. They're all really powerful no matter whether they're summoned or sent to grave, and so Alphin actually does a really good job just on its own, and if your opponent doesn't know what they're doing, they're not going to Ash it, because they don't really think of it as much of a threat. As you can see, all of them are different levels. We have a level 1, 3, 4, 5, and 7. With the level 5 and 7 having their own special summoning conditions, red layer allows you to special it if you control no monsters from your hand, and white layer allows you to send a non-light super quant from your hand or face-up field to grave to special it in defense. Now, this is actually really good because some archetypes, especially older ones, would actually make you hard summon these or try to summon them through a different means, so having their own special summoning conditions, especially something like white layer being able to trigger all of your other ones, is really, really good. They're all different attributes as well to correspond with their whole different elemental and power mechanic that they have, and they all have varying stat lines with 1200 by 2000, 1600 by 1400, 2000 by 800, and 2400 by 2400. So even if you don't have access to your really strong extra deck monsters, you actually do still have access to some pretty good beat sticks in the main deck with red and white layer. It's actually a pretty simple main deck lineup of monsters. You just want to max out on all of them as much as possible, especially because we do play the One of Desires in the main deck, but also just because you want to keep utilizing your resources over and over the best you can in order to sort of burn your opponent out while also getting out your own big boss monsters. For the non-super quants that actually synergize really well with the archetype, we have Diviner of the Herald and the Trias Hierarchia engine, and this is only because Diviner of the Herald allows you to dump a fairy from deck or extra to grave to increase its level. So you're going to dump Trias Hierarchia, which says if it's in the hand or grave quick effect, you contribute up to 3 fairies to special it, and then banish it when it leaves the field, and all of its other effects are completely, irrelevant, because Diviner says that if it's tributed, you get to special a level 2 or lower fairy monster from your hand or deck except itself. Super Quantal Fairy Alphin is a level 1 fairy. So basically, you have the 3 copies here, while also having the 3 copies of Diviner of the Herald, allowing you to start off with a normal summon. Your opponent might think you're playing Drytron, and then, surprise, you're actually summoning Super Quantal Fairy Alphin off of the stupid level 2 Diviner. We also have a Danger package consisting of 3 Nessie, 1 Snake, and 1 Jackalope. This is actually really good, not just because it nets you more card advantage in terms of the draw power and more bodies on board, but also because the discards do trigger all of your graveyard effects for all of your Super Quantums, so the Dangers sort of act like extra limbs for the Super Quant strategy, because look, you got 2 level 3s and 3 level 7s. You actually run level 3s and level 7s with their respective rank exceeds. The draw power they give, while also being able to net you all of the effects of these guys, is actually really good for the archetype, because you are going to be burning through a lot of hand resources, especially with the field spell, which we will come up to in a second, and so the engine is just super welcome in any build of Super Quant you may be playing. So onto the field spell, Super Quantal Mech Ship Magna Carrier. This is a really, really crazy card, and one of the most important cards for you to draw in the archetype if you want to try to get the win condition out at all. So what Magna Carrier says is that you get to discard a card to target any Super Quantum monster you control, and special from your extra a Super Quantal Mech B succeeds with the same attribute as that monster by using it as material, and it's treated as an Xyz summon. Keep in mind, this is not once per turn, so while you will be burning through a lot of discards, this will not only be triggering your stuff up here, but you'll also be able to get out as many Xyz monsters really as you choose, so long as you have the attributes. And the way this helps you get to the win condition is that it says you can send it from the field zone to the graveyard, then target 3 Super Quantal Mech Beast Xyz with different names you control, and or in your graveyard, special a Super Quantal Mech King Great Magnus from your extra deck, and if you do, attach the targeted monsters and their materials to it as material. So this is already kind of an incredibly stupid summoning condition in terms of the insane amount of advantage that you get, not only being able to use field and grave, but also transferring the materials. But if you, for some reason, slept under a rock all these years and not known about Super Quantal Mech King Great Magnus, I'm gonna show him to you in a second. This is Super Quantal Mech King Great Magnus, the Megazord, the win con, the entire reason to play the Super Quant strategy. It is a rank 12 light machine with 3600 attack and 3200 defense. It says it requires 3 level 12s, and if it's sent to the graveyard, you can special 3 Super Quantal Mech B succeeds with different names from your graveyard, so basically all the ones that die for its sins in order to summon it, and it gains these effects based on the number of materials with different names attached to it. 2 or more. Once per turn, during the main phase, quick effect, you can detach a material from this card. Non-target shuffle 1 card from the field into the deck. 4 or more. It is unaffected by card effects except Super Quant cards. 6 or more. Your opponent cannot add cards from the deck to the hand by card effects. Who thought this was okay? So keep in mind, before the newest wave of support, and before the Master Rule 4 stuff, revision especially, this was essentially nigh impossible to get out unless you waited forever, letting a bunch of different guys die for their sins, and then finally using the field spell to summon it after like 6 turns have passed if you somehow lived that long playing fucking Super Quants. It was super hard to get this guy out. But now, with no zone restrictions and all of the new stuff that they got in Dark Neostorm, this guy's actually, like, super easy to get out in a decent regular hand. Not only does it float, which I always forget is actually there because he's almost never going to die that way, but he also has non-targeting shuffle removal, aka the literal strongest removal in the game that you could have on any card. It is unaffected by all card effects except Super Quants, and it has a Colossus Mistake effect. This is probably one of the main definitions of a boss monster you can find not only in Yu-Gi-Oh! But in any card game period, and is one of the most bloated sacks of shit I have ever seen, and I'm here for it. I absolutely love ridiculous card design like this, especially in really underwhelming archetypes. You'll probably see a lot of that kind of stuff here on Sleeper Sunday, but Great Magnus is just absolutely absurd, and I really enjoy actually being able to summon this. Under the rest of the deck profile, though, obviously we have the Terraforming. We also have 3 E-Tele because Blue Layer, aka one of the most important, if not the most important non-alpha and low-level Super Quants, is actually a level 3 Psychic, meaning that you basically have 6 copies of her, which is 9 total copies of your field spell, because most of the time, if you don't already have it, you're going to be searching the field spell off of Blue Layer anyway. We also have 3 Droplet because the deck can struggle going second sometimes. You could play Dark Ruler, but Droplet is actually really, really good with the deck because you're not really negging too much to use the effects because they all trigger if they're sent to the graveyard. And then we have a bunch of 1-ofs in the form of Desires because we max out copies of almost everything. 1-for-1 because Alphan is free and we get to trigger the things that we send. Reasoning because you play a bunch of different levels and your opponent's going to have a bitch of a time trying to get the exact level. Foolish because they all trigger Engrave. Monster Reborn because it allows you to continue your plays if you get interrupted. And then Called By for the exact same reason. So Zeus aside as the honorary second Great Magnus, we have 4 different Super Quantal Mech Beasts, aka their little Zords, and they all have similar effects, saying that they cannot attack unless they have material, which I think is a bit odd, to be honest. I feel like it's actually not that crazy to let them attack. They also, all once per turn, allow you to attach a Super Quantum from hand or field as Xyz material to it, and they all have effects that by detaching material allow you to do some sort of disruption or removal that is a quick effect if you have their respective layer. Lusterex allows you to imperm something, which is a quick effect if you have white layer. Magna Liger allows you to pop a monster targeting, which is a quick effect if you have red layer. Ouroboros allows you to Book of Moon something, which is a quick effect if you have green layer. And then Grand Pulse, which is probably the most well-known one, is an MST that is a quick effect if you use blue layer. They're all actually really nice, simple removal effects on a bunch of different rank Xyz monsters. Ouroboros is obviously the worst one because book effects don't really affect link monsters. However, they can get rid of some super oppressive monsters, which I will show you in the replays. But all of them overall have some really nice effects, so they're not even too bad to have on board if you don't have Great Magnus, which I think is really cool. If for some reason you can't access your Great Magnus, you actually have access to Megaclops, which is also a really insane boss monster, because 3 Xyz monsters is actually the same materials that Great Magnus requires, just without having to be an Xyz itself. It's unaffected by everything except Xyz monsters, can only be destroyed by battle with an Xyz monster. You can target an Xyz in your grave and a card the opponent controls, special from grave, and then attach that card, essentially being a better Cyber Dragon Infinity, while also getting all of these things live. Unfortunately, you won't be able to summon back Great Magnus unless you properly summon it, because this does not treat it as an Xyz summon, which is kind of sad. But you can summon back any of these little guys, which will allow you to get some really nice removal on board, while also disrupting the opponent by getting rid of their stuff. So in Dark Neostorm, they actually got a Link monster, which a lot of people, including myself, kind of agree that it's not really that great, and it only exists as a Link 3 because you need 3 things on board to use your field spell for Great Magnus, but it kind of ended up crippling the card because it's super hard for this deck to not only commit 3 cards for a Link, but then to also go on and go into Great Magnus afterwards is literally impossible unless you use all 3 of your Xyzes for this, but then you're not going to have more than 3 materials on your Great Magnus, which is really sad. But Magnus, not overall too terrible of a card. By the way, his name is super bloated. It's Neo Super Quantal Met King Blaster Magna. Okay, I guess. but it requires 2 or more effect monsters, including a super quant, which is actually pretty nice because that means you can use your dangers and your Trias Hierarchia for it. It says that if it's link summoned, it cannot be destroyed by opponent's card effects, which is actually some really nice protection. I am glad they gave it protection. It says each time a super quant exceeds with a different name from the cards you already control is special to from the extra deck to a zone it points to, you get to draw a card, which is good for replenishing the resources that you use to discard off of the field spell. And it says if a face-up exceeds monster this card points to is destroyed by battle or an opponent's card, you can special in a super quant from your deck with the same original attribute as one of the destroyed exceeds monsters. You can only use this effect, or this effect once per turn. So overall, it's not actually a bad boss monster. The only thing that makes it a bit iffy in terms of whether you want to play it or summon it is just the fact that it requires so many resources, which is why I am glad that they made it to where it doesn't require just super quantums. That would just be agony and I wouldn't play it at all. But I actually do summon it a decent amount because not only does it have some pretty good protection and some nice stats, but also just the draw power is really nice, and then the sort of recursion that it gives you when your stuff dies is also pretty cool too. We also have Unicorn and Phoenix for some decent removal, with Masquerena to pair with it, and then we have Link Kuriboh for our Alphen just in case we need it, though let's be real, we're going to be tributing Alphen more than anything anyway. So that's actually going to be it for our little deck profile. I'm going to actually go ahead and let you guys go see some replays now that I got. It's not that many compared to what I usually have, but I did get a test hand for both Great Magnus and 2 actual replays in some real games against both Despia and Shaddoll. And so I really hope you guys enjoy because it'll actually show you some of the really cool stuff that this deck can do. I am not the best Super Quant player, keep that in mind by the way. They probably could have gone a lot better, but I still think they were really nice nonetheless. I hope you all enjoy, and I'll see you in a minute. Alright, so those were some of the replays that we had for Super Quantum. Again, I do wish I had a bit more, but I was just a bit strapped on time in terms of making this already. But I hope it was enough to actually show you guys how the deck can function and some of the cool things that it can do. Being able to play around that Shaddoll player's window was one of my favorite things. Being able to normal the green layer, use the field spell to go into Ouroboros, flip it face down, and then proceed to go off with all of my other plays was just super, super cool. But with the replays out of the way, let's go ahead and get onto some of the strengths that the deck has. So, I'm not even going to speak on this one. I'm just gonna show this for a few seconds. There's strength number 1. I also think that they have some really cool mini boss monsters and that they're actually a really unique archetype for not just having a really strong boss monster, but they don't like completely solely focus on getting it out. Their own little boss monsters, their own little actual mini Zords that go into the Great Magnus are all really good on their own, being able to both MST, Regeki Break, Book of Moon, Imperm. All these are pretty solid effects on some pretty solid stat lines that are really easy to get out with something like the field spell. And so I'm glad it wasn't dumbed down into like literally the entire deck revolving around just making Magnus. I think the field spell being able to use material both on field and in grave is actually kind of ridiculous. I think it's super strong and something that can actually help the deck a lot. Granted, you don't get any materials from grave if you do that, just the actual Xyz monsters themselves, but it's still really strong nonetheless. I've had a lot of situations where it's just, you know, a 2-mat Xyz on board, a 1-mat Xyz on board, and then a random Xyz in grave, being able to mash together, which I think is really good for something like this, because even though you don't get all the effects if you do just grave materials, you're getting a really big body for free with some crazy removal. I also think the deck is very simple and easy to pick up, even though it does have a little bit of a higher skill ceiling. It has a very low skill floor. All of the effects are super simplistic, you know, on summon, if sent to grave, tribute for 3 random things. You know, the dangers are really straightforward themselves as well. Diviner, you know, on summon, dump, tribute, special your Alphen. And it's a really nice, simple Xyz deck, which I think is really cool because, again, it does remind me a lot of Satellar Knight and Burning Abyss, both decks that I think are actually really low skill floor decks. And I love seeing archetypes that are really, really good for new players to get into the game because we could always use some more players in the Yu-Gi-Oh community. And so if you actually have some cards lying around or you want to recommend a pretty good and easy to learn beginner's deck that also has some complex themes to it, and you're trying to get a friend into the game, I would totally recommend Super Quantums. Now, on to the weaknesses. So, one of the main weaknesses is that it requires a lot of resources to get into their final boss monster. Granted, I don't think this is too bad of a thing considering just how strong Great Magnus is, but most of the time, more often than not, Magna Carrier is going to neg almost your entire hand, if not your entire hand, because of the discard requirement, just to get out your Great Magnus. And while this does trigger some of your floating things, you are also going to be getting rid of some of the really good stuff, like, you know, an Alphen, or stuff that you've already triggered the effect of, and so sometimes it could hurt you a lot more than it helps you. A couple of the effects are a bit underwhelming, such as Blue Layer's floating effect, because if it drew a card to replace the resources, I think it'd be, like, immensely better. But I just think overall, right now, it's just kind of a really bad Daiguster Emerald. I find myself not triggering it more than any of the other cards. I think I use it maybe once a game if it goes past turn 3. And we also have Green Layer, which is a bit specific, requiring you to have a thing in hand. And White Layer can actually be completely dead for their floating effects, simply if you already used Alpha in that turn. So I think some of their effects are a bit underwhelming, and I kind of understand that, considering that it'd be a bit too strong if they had some really crazy effects just from being sent to grave by any means. But I think they could have just been a smidgen better. Some hands rely very heavily on the RNG of Alphan and actually resolving Alphan, because say you have a hand that's actually really bad, but if you get the field spell, it's like actually completely saved and you're gonna win, or you're going to be in a lot better of a situation, and you use Alpha and you reveal like Blue Layer, Green Layer, Red Layer or something like that, or like White Layer instead of Green Layer, and you end up like dumping both the Red Layer and Blue Layer, and then you summon the Green or the White. And then you really have a bad time because now you don't have access to your field spell and you have now no way of accessing your field spell. So certain hands can be really RNG heavy, which is something I don't really like about the Alphan, but I still think it's just a strong enough card as is to kind of warrant forgiving it in a sense. And then finally, it cannot reliably be played pure. As you can see, I do have the Diviners and the Dangers and then a bunch of random, you know, back row stuff. This is probably the purest form you can actually get to regular Super Quantums, but you kind of have to have like outside support in the form of these things like the dangers, you can't really just play like 40 cards, super quantums with their own back row, right? And so that's where I think the deck stands in terms of weaknesses. Now, that in mind, how are we making the deck better? So I think that we need more back row with graveyard effects due to all of the discarding, especially spells, because I've only shown you one super quant back row. They have 5. Yes, all of these cards except for the field spell are either super underwhelming or really, really bad. Alphen Spike allows you to shuffle all of your opponent's stuff into the deck, which is really cool, but it has a pretty steep cost, and it allows your opponent to special any monster from their extra, ignoring its summoning conditions. And it's really disappointing because its graveyard effect is actually really good, allowing you to banish it and Alphen from the grave to activate the field spell from the deck. Like, if the first effect of this card wasn't so terrible, I would love to play this because it's the exact kind of graveyard effect I would love to see on more cards because of how important the field spell is. Alphen Call Appeal is actually one of their newer pieces of support that feels like it was made back in 2012. It allows you to special a Super Quant Mech Beast exceeds from extra if a Super Quant monster you control is destroyed by battle, and it has no graveyard effect. Magna Slayer is an equip trap that allows your card to gain 100 times attack equal to the rank that it has. Then it makes it do piercing, and you can send it to grave to make it attack 3 times. Why? Why would you ever do that? And then Magna Formation, I think, is actually a good card if it were a continuous spell, because it gives targeting protection for your super quant cards during your main phase 1, while also letting you have a pseudo bird sanctuary, but it also has no graveyard effect. The only one of these with a graveyard effect is Alphen Spike, and it's arguably the worst one, strictly just due to how insane the first effect is for the opponent. So I would love to see not just more good back row in general, but specifically more with actually good graveyard effects like Alphen Spike, because I think that the deck would benefit a lot from it due to all the discarding that's going on. I think some more native swarming to the deck would also be really nice. Maybe, you know, something that's sort of like an E-Telly or a quick launch, but maybe it locks you into super quantums or something like that, because I think it could really benefit from having more ways to access things like Blue Lair, or even just any of your guys in general directly from your deck, because while Alphen is really strong, you don't exactly get to choose the thing that you want to summon now, do you? Finally, I do think a better draw power engine would be really nice for the deck outside of the Link monster, because the Link monster has actually some really good draw power, but it feels like an effect that should have been on something like the field spell. So maybe a continuous spell that not only has one of the graveyard effects I mentioned earlier, but also something that says, you know, every time you exceed summon a super quant, draw 1 card or something like that. I think it'd be really strong, but I don't think it'd be too crazy, but I don't know. Let me know down in the comments if you think otherwise. That's actually all I can really think of. I think that super quant is actually in a really good spot, especially now more than ever with the Master Rule 4 2020 revisions. But let me know in the comments below, actually, do you play super quantum, or does anyone you know play super quantum? Do you like super quantum? I think the deck is actually really neat. I love the whole Power Ranger gimmick and aesthetic. I think they all look really cool, and I've always been a really guilty fan of like Xyz spam decks, except for, you know, like Zodiac, I guess. But decks that can easily bring out really strong Xyz monsters have always been a really good favorite in my book. So I don't know, it kind of has like a little bit of a soft spot in my heart, just probably not as much as the other Sleeper Sunday decks that we've covered so far. But that's just me. Again, let me know down in the comments below, because that's going to do it for the video. I hope you all enjoyed this Sleeper Sunday. I know it took forever to come out, but I promised that I would get it out at least by the end of the month, and it's before the end of the month, so let's go, baby. Keep in mind that next week or later this week, I will be putting up the poll for next month's Sleeper Sunday. I will be doing a new poll every month for a new Sleeper Sunday every month, or I will at least try to, so keep your heads up for that, because they only stay up for about 24 hours total. But yeah, with that out of the way, that's going to do it for the video. If you liked it, please sure to leave a like, as I'll put this video and the channel into YouTube recommended. And if you really liked it and you want to see more content like it, like the rest of my Sleeper Sunday series, then perhaps consider subscribing, because we make awesome Yu-Gi-Oh content like this every day. I try to. It supports the channel more than anything else, and of course, it's completely free. But once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Aurora, signing off.